Thank you for joining us here at NASCA today. I see several of our members joining in, dialing into our audio. Thank you so much for joining us today for another one of our top 10 monthly events around our state priorities, really unpacking the various components of state government operations and work in our states here at NASCA. Again, so many folks joining us today. I can see already you're coming from all around the country. We are thrilled to have you. We have a fantastic panel for you today. You're going to be thrilled with the conversation with our corporate and our state members talking about strategic workforce planning. If you're just coming in and you haven't been here with NASCA before, go in, if you will, and please rename yourself, list your name and then your state, your agency, or your company that you're with, so we know who's with us here today. Also take advantage of the chat feature. Say hello to your colleagues, drop in where you're dialing in from. If you're interested in connecting with NASCA, please make sure you dropped your LinkedIn profile and an opportunity to connect with us. Still see several folks coming in. In just one moment, we want everyone to have an opportunity to hear us and be with us for the entire event. But again, welcome. This is NASCA's State Priorities for our Chief Administrators, one of our monthly events, and thrilled to have everyone coming in here with us today. We still have folks coming in from the waiting room, but let's go ahead and get started. Again, we've got a wonderful panel today. We're going to be unpacking how to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion in strategic workforce planning, really looking at productivity, but how states become those employers of choice, really what it means to be regarded as an exemplary employer, really looking at those components of state branding, employer branding, consistency in messaging, looking also at upskilling, reskilling, filling those talent gaps, how everything connects to a state or an agency and department strategic goal, and then also how that leads to increased productivity. Again, welcome. I am Pam Goins, Executive Director here at NASCA. We're thrilled to have you with us here today. We've got a wonderful panel to talk with us today, again, looking at our corporate and state members. You see on the screen here our four panelists today. Jay Carlisle, who's the General Manager of State and Local LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Peter Renner, who's the Chief Human Resources Officer in the state of Ohio, Dr. Kiana Connor, Managing Director of Deloitte Consulting, and also Steve Harp, who's the Director at the state of Oklahoma. So we're really looking forward to an excellent opportunity to unpack both this consistent messaging and branding with upskilling and filling talent gaps. But before we get started, let's kick off with a couple of polls today and see where you are in your own state. So here's the first one. Does your state use a unified brand for all of its agencies, or does each group build their own logo and messaging? Take just a second and respond to that. Is it enterprise-wide, or is it agency by agency with perhaps maybe a less than cohesive brand and message? Oh, it looks like from the responses so far, individualized department or agency branding is leading the way. Much fewer, less percentage on enterprise-wide. All right, Kayla, let's go to our second poll here. Here's our results. So we thought 3/4 is agency by agency. How about this one? During the health pandemic, did your individual agency deploy employees to roles that they were not initially hired to do? We heard around the country, a lot of folks were moved into unemployment insurance, perhaps into a health arena. In your agency or your department, were there employees that were sent to do roles that they were not initially hired to do? Perhaps their job description or title didn't meet what they were actually doing. Oh, again, 3/4 are saying yes. Let's give it just another second. We'll let Kayla show us the results. And again, 3/4 are saying yes, employees were asked to do jobs that they were not initially hired to do. It's going to be interesting for our conversation today. And then our third polling question before we start with our panel. Does your agency utilize reskilling or upskilling employees to fill talent gaps or take on new roles? And if you don't know exactly what those two definitions are, no worries, we're going to talk about that. But in your individual agencies or departments, is there a routine or a consistent focus on reskilling or upskilling so that those talent gaps are reduced and lowered? All right, Kayla, what are we looking at? Okay, so just over half say yes, but still a large percentage are saying no, that their agencies are not tackling this wonderful advantage of upskilling or reskilling. All right, well, that sets us up for our conversation today. And again, as I mentioned, we have 4 panelists here with us today to represent both our corporate partners and our state members, sharing from both perspectives how we, again, look at that a consistent messaging, employer of choice, branding, and then we're going to think about more reducing those talent gaps, look at upskilling and reskilling. We're going to kick off today with Jay Carlisle from LinkedIn, who's going to share a little bit about branding and that consistent message and the critical importance of that. So Jay, let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pam. We'll get, if you get the slides going. I got a couple slides here. I was asked to be not too death by PowerPoint, but I've got a few here. When we're talking about branding, it's hard to stay away from imagery. But again, Jay Carlisle, General Manager, State and Local Government, Talent Solutions for LinkedIn. I'm going to be presenting here a little bit on what is just a fraction of like the larger talent landscape or talent acquisition strategy the government's, I guess, could or should be looking at, focusing on employer branding. So we go to the next slide. Typically in a full talent strategy, we look at them in like 3 buckets, right? Plan, hire, develops, kind of the narrative or the kind of the work stream that we work through. Employer branding typically sits in the hire bucket. Unless you don't really have a focus on branding today, you probably still have one, you just don't know what it is. It may sit more in the planning bucket. So if we could go 1 slide forward. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of brand. Actually, that next slide was the right one. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of brand real quick. Not necessarily employer brand, but if you look at these logos, I'm hoping, or I'm imagining almost everyone in the audience today recognizes at least the majority of these logos. If we could build this slide out. It just so happens that almost all of these companies or brands happen to be either LinkedIn top companies or Glassdoor best places to work just in this past year. And the ones that were not mentioned or not shown here, they have been in the past. So it shows that branding and employer branding oftentimes go hand in hand. 1 more slide. It sounds like 75% of the audience might relate to this, but all of these logos used to resemble one state. And I know the importance for DOTs and ITs and the other agencies to own their brand and their logo. From a candidate perspective, sometimes it's confusing. So if you could move forward 1 more slide. This is now what the state of Tennessee's branding, just logos, not employer branding, but this is what their branding out to the marketplace for everything government represents looks like today. A lot more cohesive, just in my view, and I think they've done a great job. 1 more slide. And Ohio's done an amazing job giving a little bit of flexibility to that same consistency throughout. I don't know if you notice any similarities here. 1 more build, some arrows will show up. There's a little O that has a little bit of consistency all the way out. And if you look at Ohio Department of Education, they got the little graduation cap in there, and then the broadcast and media, the little play sign. So they've given the agencies a little bit of leeway to play with that brand consistency logoing all throughout. 1 more slide. Again, more of that same consistency coming from Nebraska and Oklahoma. Nebraska is doing, I really like the fact that they've got this tagline that is good life, great something. And that something ties back to the agency who's being represented in whichever logo is depicted. And then Oklahoma, I believe, just recently did a rebranding as well, using that infamous Oklahoma Star and bringing some consistency throughout their department. So some examples of what branding looks like that where you can tie everything together before we get to employer branding. 1 more slide. So this is what we've done internally when it comes to LinkedIn and our employee resource groups. We realized that if we're going to message this way, that we should eat our own dog food, so to speak. And this is for our employee resource groups. This is just how we're marketing and branding to our own employees or even external candidates, the employee resource groups that are available if you join LinkedIn. They all have the same little LinkedIn in bug, but they have a little bit of their own nuance, right? Everyone recognizes the camouflage for military or the rainbow flag for the LGBTQ community. So if we could go 1 more slide ahead. You don't have to take it from me. If you're going to take it from anybody, let's take it from SHRM, right? They say in big, bold capital letters, branding matters. Use your company's brand to find the best hires. Your company's reputation matters when trying to recruit and retain employees. One more. And then on the transverse, we've got a generation of young people who are probably the most purpose motivated than ever before. There's something missing about how we, meaning government, is communicating with what it means to be a public servant and the opportunities to do impactful work, said by Dan Vogel. So one more slide ahead. So you can leave it here for just a minute. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about employer brand. So what is an employer brand? It's your reputation as a workplace for how others externally perceive you as an employer or potentially an employer of choice. It's the impression that people have, knowing very little else about what you've been able to tell them about what your, in this case, your state or your department or your agency is like, and what your missions, your vision, and your culture is made up of. Your message can be found at any time by anybody, anywhere. And if you're not owning your message, it's being developed by somebody else on a poor Glassdoor review or in some third-party location where somebody made their own messaging that you couldn't control. Now, I realize employer branding comes with an investment, time, blood, sweat, money, equity, tears, etc. But it pays dividends, so there is an ROI. I can find the stat later for you or the source, but 43% decrease in recruitment costs come with a strong employer brand. Or in the transverse, we look at about a 10% cost or 10% reduction in cost per hire. So it costs you less to do your recruitment efforts with a strong employer brand. So with that, what does a strong employer brand do for you? So it does three main things. It helps, it impacts your ability to attract diverse talent. It allows you to hire the right candidates, not the candidates that are just going to be there for, a short amount of time and then leave for the next opportunity. And it also boosts confidence in your overall organization. So your existing employees are proud to work for your state, your department, your agency, right? So what do you do with an employer brand? Well, you have to make sure it's an authentic story. So people can see through the falsehoods today. We're not that gullible all that anymore, but it needs to truly embody your culture, your mission, and your values. And it has to be a cohesive a cohesive message. It doesn't have to be all the same logo across the agencies. Well, that's nice, but you do need to have a consistent and cohesive message that you're telling the world about what it is to like, what it's like to work for your organization. And then of course, like anything else, you review it, you make sure that it still is applicable every so often, X number of years. And then where does it, so with this employer brand, what do you do with it? So for example, you can build a website, you can host it on your state page and hope people come to see this website and tell your story there. Social media doesn't have to be LinkedIn. I'm biased, of course, but I think social media is a great place to tell the world your story, right? Social media has proven to help agencies effectively engage citizens and deliver information quickly. I don't know one government that doesn't tweet immediate as soon as there's some sort of emergency or some sort of information they need to get out to society ASAP, right? I think Instagram failed for like 2 seconds the other day. Immediately, everyone was checking Twitter to see what was wrong with Instagram. Like that's the world that we live in today. So when it comes to social media for employer branding and recruitment, 3 things hold true. It helps you produce a higher volume of candidates, a better talent fit, and a lower employee acquisition cost. And I'm not saying that those 3 things are actually brought to you by a study done by Hootsuite and GovLoop. The rough percentage that is stated out there is you get about 50% more hires if you actively use social media to promote your employer brand. So then when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, employer brand is at the intersection of that. We know the benefits of what a strong diverse and equitable workforce does for organizations, whether you're public or private, the benefits that come. But what about the people that are job searching, right? Diversity and inclusion is absolutely a top priority today for people evaluating new job opportunities. Full stop, it absolutely is. And we also know that individuals are looking for a sense of belonging so they can bring their whole true self to work and not feel like they have to cover or hide anything that is their true identity. If they have to spend more of their brain power worrying about what other people are thinking about them in the workplace, all that effort could be used towards bringing value back to the state, back to the department. And diversity in leadership absolutely encourages career development for underrepresented groups. In fact, the other stat I'll throw at you, 39% of candidates today decline working for an organization due to their lack of diversity, equity, or inclusion practices. One thing also that I'll mention, when it comes to the employer brand, the flip side of that is relying too heavily on referrals. Historically, government has done a good job of relying on referrals, and unfortunately, that has unintended consequences. Three quick numbers for you. 12% of white women are less likely to get a referral. 26% of men of color are less likely to get a referral, and 35% of women of color are less likely to get a referral. So referrals can still be a portion of your talent acquisition strategy. When it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, it needs to be put off to the side, and branding and equity needs to be the focus. One more slide ahead. I'll stop with the stagnant slide there that's been sitting there for a couple minutes. So this is how typical hiring, the hiring journey used to go, right? It used to be search a job board, get referred, apply, maybe take an entrance exam, wait list, and then interview. One more slide. But this is what it looks like today, right? Before that job opportunity, or before somebody actually applies for that job, so much happens on the front end. Think about the last time you bought a lawnmower or refrigerator. You did a tremendous amount of research just to think about a lawnmower or refrigerator before you walked into Best Buy or Home Depot to make that purchase, right? A job is so much more important. Think about all the research and all the information people are consuming about the different brands of these products. And that's just for a home appliance versus their career. So in this case, somebody sees information about an agency, they start to follow an agency on social media, they look at employee reviews, and maybe they reach out and make a connection with one of the agencies to talk to them about what it's like to work for them. That's what happens on the front end. That's where brand comes in. One more slide. So I'll show you a few examples of who's doing some diversity, equity, inclusion branding in a very, very robust or a very strategic way. First off, state of Ohio, they are coming out and telling the world they embrace diversity, equity, inclusion at the state. Next slide. The California Department of Housing and Community Development, their point here is they value diversity at all levels, and they recognize the important, and they're committed to fostering an environment in which employees from a variety of backgrounds and cultures and experiences feel welcomed. One more example. Sound Transit, while not a state agency, they're doing an amazing job of telling the world that they have a culture that is embedded of inclusion and respect. And they back that up with a video testimonial, links to accessibility for all. They showed the world their employee resources group, and they give everyone the opportunity to go inside Sound Transit to find out what it's like to work for Sound Transit, regardless of your background. So they're doing a fantastic job of this. Next slide. Virginia Department of Transportation, they have a veterans internship program. If you know, I know typically we think of diversity as ethnicity, race, or demographic, but it also is all the non-inherent features or aspects of someone, like being a parent. You weren't born a parent, you became a parent. Like a veteran, you weren't born a veteran, you became a veteran by choice. They're showing that they've got a veteran internship program. It's part of the 2D diversity that we talk about. One more slide. And then the messaging that you're putting out there, right? Oregon Health Authority does a great job of telling the world that their state hospital nurses have to find innovative ways to connect with their diverse patients, right? Not only is their workforce diverse, but their customers, their patients are, just like the citizens of the states. Next slide. In New York City, also not a state, but they're bigger than some states. They're showing real people with real stories, right? On the left, the Department of Transportation. It's Employee Appreciation Day in this post. They're talking about they're showing a slideshow video montage of their employees posing at different work sites, and they're of every walk of life. And on the right, the Department of Environmental Protection. They're talking about the New York Harbor is cleaner because of I think it's Batya has been a shift engineer working there. He's got his COVID mask on, he's behind the desk, and he's keeping the Jamaica Bay safe. So those are some examples about how people are taking what it truly does embody, what government is doing to embody diversity, equity, inclusion in their work, and showing the world, potential candidates, what it would be to work for these organizations. And this is done on a consistent message. So one more slide. And I think I'm wrapping. Yes. So a couple key takeaways: to attract, engage, and hire top talent, you need to highlight the true breadth of diversity that exists within state government. Remember the golden content rule, which is show, don't just tell. Spotlight how you take a holistic view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, both in your recruitment efforts as well as in the workplace. And then organize your content around themes, not just calendar. For anybody that's big on content calendars, doing it around themes is the preferred way. And I think that might be the end of my prepared material. There'll be a couple of checklists as a takeaway for anybody who wants this deck later that you'll be able to review at a later date. And I believe I'm passing it back to Pam?
Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate your comments, and thank you so much for all of those examples. It's so nice to see those visual representation of the great work that's happening around the country. I also think some of your comments were critically important that we all hear. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a critical search tool for job seekers, and those strong employer messages and branding is what attracts them. A key component to recruitment, retainment, and that consistent, really sense of belonging with individual agencies. So one of the states you heard Jay talk about was Ohio. We're thrilled to have Peter Renner here from the state HR agency to share a little bit about the work that Ohio was doing, a little bit about their DEI efforts, and a little bit more about their journey. So Peter, we'll toss it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Peter Renner. I'm the State Chief Human Resources Officer for the state of Ohio. And so it's a pleasure to speak with you today surrounding Ohio's efforts in working to become an employer of choice and how branding, recruitment, and diversity, equity, and inclusion support that initiative. So the state of Ohio as an employer is made up of many agencies, boards, and commissions, like many of the states that are on this call today. And they all have specific missions to support the residents of the state of Ohio, but have at times been somewhat disjointed in their approach to effectively message not only to potential candidates, but also to our employees, what it means to be a state employee. I think that's a large concern that we have had as a larger employer as the state of Ohio. And so just a little bit of background, each one of our agencies has their own HR staff, or the vast majority at the very least have their own HR staff. And so we, as the State Human Resources Division, as the State Chief Human Resources Officer, provide what we would say service, support, and solutions to those agencies. And so we are also providing direct oversight and leadership in all HR functions from an enterprise perspective across our state. And so I just want to share that as well as a background, because that may differ a little bit from some of the states on this call, especially in conversations I've had with maybe some of my NASPE peers over time. So again, back to this disjointed messaging that we have as a state. And so it really was creating an environment in which the experience of a candidate or the employee could vary drastically by agency to agency, even on some very, very small things. So the onboarding process or how we communicate certain things. And so even though we had this, what I would view as a really great total rewards package, we really were competitive in the marketplace. We continued to find ourselves struggling in an increasingly competitive marketplace to really attract the talent we were looking for across all state agencies. And so it wasn't just in very specific fields. Long gone were the days in which the state of Ohio had great benefits and pay and everyone was just going to apply and that's how it was going to be. We really had to get out of that mindset. So two areas that we found it was imperative to tackle were not only what I would call our physical branding, so how we market ourselves, but also our cultural branding. So can we back up what our marketing is saying after the individual is employed? That's really important. So I'll focus just on a couple of areas of the physical branding first and foremost. So as you saw in the previous presentation by Jay, the Ohio Department of Administrative Services communication team did an excellent job, in my opinion, of creating a uniformity within our logos of state agencies, boards and commissions, and in our branding, and really allowing for some personality of each agency to sort of stick out. But I think it's really important that we did this because it reiterates subconsciously to potential candidates for employment, which we would view as every resident of the state of Ohio and really everyone for that matter, and to our employees. So not only are we trying to message to potential candidates, but also to our current workforce that even though each agency, board, and commission vary based on some very specific missions, that we're all still part of a larger organization working together and tied together. So as part of this process, we said then, okay, so how does our recruitment branding and messaging really stack up? So we have our agency branding better. We're getting close to where we need to be from a uniformity standpoint. How do we ensure that our recruitment branding is the same? So we had been using this hashtag Team Ohio, and we had been using the slogan, "It's more than just a job," for a while. And it gained some traction in social media and in recruitment efforts. That was great. However, what did that really mean? What did it really mean to say it's more than just a job? What does Team Ohio mean? So, as you know, or as you may know, I should say, research has shown over and over and over again that individuals really value the idea that they're doing meaningful work, that they're doing impactful work, that they are making a difference in some form or another. And oftentimes that's sort of utilized in conversation about millennials. But in my research and what I have seen, I think that applies to everybody in a lot of ways. I think we're all feeling better about life when we are working for an employer that we think is doing a good job and really benefiting society. I know I am. So, as I'm sure many of you already feel, state government has amazing stories to tell regarding the differences it makes in the lives of its residents on a daily basis. Unbelievable stories that need to be told to allow other people to actually get a better understanding of who we are as an employer. So we felt the best people to tell those stories were the employees themselves. But they needed a centralized format to do so. It had been very disjointed again. And so we had to market the state as one large employer. And so one way we're doing that, and Jay will like this, is the utilization of our state LinkedIn recruitment page that we created a couple of years ago. And so this page is a centralized hub, a one-stop shop, if you will, in which we could tell the story of the state employment through videos that spotlight how the state makes a difference and is more than just a job through the voice of our employees. And so I think that's been really impactful. And so this page also allows us to highlight specific initiatives, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, and create targeted strategies for recruitment of hard to fill fields of work, such as information technology, healthcare fields, so on and so forth. We also took those videos and embedded them directly into our job postings. What it's doing is reiterating to candidates what it means to be a state employee, as well as giving an overview of the agency and the job itself. Some of you may have already done that. We find that to be very effective. Again, we're starting at the very beginning of messaging what it means to be employed by the state of Ohio, what we value, so on and so forth. State agencies also directly affiliate or link themselves to our LinkedIn page so that employees have sort of, again, or candidates have easy access to receive more specific information surrounding those state agencies, boards and commissions. So again, this has been effective in messaging that the state of Ohio has many missions, but we're all working together to benefit the residents of the state of Ohio daily. So even though this program, along with other social media efforts that we have, is sort of still what I would consider in the infancy stages, we do have some success I can share. And so currently we're averaging about 6,000 daily post impressions, which I think is valuable. And thousands of applicants have applied directly through job links on our LinkedIn careers page, which I think is always valued because that quality of candidate has been very high. And this doesn't count the significant feedback we've received in our hiring process surrounding candidates who stated they became aware of opportunities in the state through our social media presence from one, or maybe from a reference from someone who had, and applied maybe through a more traditional way of application, such as our Ohio hiring management system. So again, this is just one way that we are trying to more effectively tell the story of not only a specific agency, but who we are as a state. Again, postings on a daily basis, reiterating the really positive things, allowing the employees to have a voice in really telling that story. So our belief is that none of that physical branding is really effective unless the employer has truly bought into the ideas that we're trying to espouse in our branding. So I like to say that employees can smell a fake. That's my opinion. That's what I have seen over and over and over again. You know when someone's sincere. We've all worked for those places that maybe someone has said, I really value my staff, but then their actions don't really speak to that. Employees notice that. So we sought to be an employer of choice. What did that mean to be an employer of choice? That sounds great. What does that mean? It means a lot of things. So when we discussed these ideas of being an employer of choice with our staff, with a wide variety of staff, the conversation kept revolving around the themes of being valued, opportunity for growth, making a difference, diversity, equity, inclusion, many other aspects as well, including more of the traditional total rewards compensation, that kind of stuff. But that really stood out to us, that our employees are really interested in knowing what we value and who we are. So the only way to truly back up those ideas of valuing our employee, DE&I, growth, all those good things, was to ensure that we had the true buy-in from management and staff, and the basic ideals of state employment permeated across the state, regardless of agency. So regardless of whether you worked in a correctional facility or the 30th or 40th floor of an office tower, um, you're still going to understand in some form or another what we're trying to accomplish as a state. And the only way to do that is really effective, large scale cultural branding, cultural building. And so that's what I feel is very, very important in this discussion about recruitment, just in general. So consistency in job screening, onboarding, training, performance management, statewide education and training surrounding disability inclusion, sexual harassment, effective communication with those who you perceive to be different than you. Those are just some examples of things that we're doing, and ensuring that there is the ability for the state to message its values in a way that's consistent across the state enterprise. So again, we are reiterating to our employees on a daily basis, in every single onboarding, training, job evaluation, on and on and on and on, the value of being a state employee and what that means. So it becomes ingrained and becomes a natural thought, not only in our recruitment and retention efforts, but also in the daily operations of our state. We have work to do, clearly, just like everyone else, but this is the attempt that we're making. This has been my experience, even working in corporate retail prior to coming to state employment several years ago, in which cultural building, and it really was valuable. It didn't matter if you worked in California or Manitoba or anywhere across the board, you really still understood what it meant to work for that company. And that's what we're trying to work through here as a state. So we've broken down the concept of being an employer of choice into small, measurable bites surrounding recruitment, retention, training, development, DE&I, amongst others, that function as strategic goals, but when brought together are intended to create an effective organizational culture that will be sustainable for years and years and years. We're trying to build a culture that outlasts me, outlasts anybody that is currently employed with the state of Ohio. That's ongoing, long-term, effective culture building. So as an example, we work with each agency to create strategic DE&I plans that aren't simply compliance-based, but focus on the operational reasons why diversity, equity, and inclusion are valuable, and to also create a more communicative and valued workforce. So our strategy is that the effectiveness of these plans aren't simply measured in end-of-year metrics, but also what outcome are we trying to accomplish at the end of this, like from year to year to year to year. How does this affect 10 years out? How does this affect 15 years out potentially in some of these conversations? So this is coupled with a significant amount of analysis and initiatives on breaking down barriers for employment, the introduction of technology that assists agencies on posting positions in many different job boards and organizations that focus on a diverse talent pool, breaking down barriers for our employees to ensure that we're reaching all the residents of the state of Ohio in these postings. And then employee community outreach, employee trainings, and forums in which we talk through concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a clear and open manner surrounding what diversity means to each person and how we are all partners in making the state of Ohio an employer of choice for all of Ohioans. And so after all, even the best DE&I recruitment efforts aren't effective if the culture the individual enters into is poor, in my opinion. So I could speak about this stuff for the next 8 hours. I mean, easily the people that know me on this call are probably like, your time is up. But I did want to let you know, this is not easy. We're missing many, many aspects, even in this conversation, of what we're doing on a daily basis. But the idea is all these different things we're doing work together. We can't just do one thing and all of a sudden have a great culture. We can't just do one thing and have effective recruitment. The concern is what happens with your effective recruitment efforts once somebody is employed with you. Are you really backing up? Are you really practicing what you preach? And I think that if there is a holistic effort and with bought-in leadership and engaged staff, and we have it bought in from our governor all the way down. Again, it's not perfect. We're still working through this stuff, but effective state branding and and all these other things that go along with it can really make a difference in our talent acquisition and retention efforts. And so, again, we have numbers to back up this information. Again, I'm not going to report numbers that we have due to the pandemic because I feel like that sort of favorably skewed our numbers a little bit. But I can tell you that prior to the pandemic, even just with a year and a half to 2 years in on this, our talent pool has gotten stronger. We're looking at larger growth in programs due to effective talent pool. In many cases, we have a reduction in turnover overwhelmingly throughout our agencies. Again, it's a difficult thing, a lot of difficult environments that you work in state employment. And then also increases in our positive employee satisfaction surveys and other mechanisms that we use to gauge that too. So we think that we're on the right track, and it is something that, again, we feel, I think, very passionate about. So again, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. My team and I are always available for any questions or discussion if that could be of help to you. And again, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter, so much. And I'm seeing some great comments in the chat, not only from your team, but also from your colleagues around the country. So thank you for all of those examples. So as you've heard, we've talked a little bit about the importance of consistent messaging and branding as part of a strategic workforce planning process. So now let's shift a little bit and start thinking about those employees who are on the team. They're hired, they're staffed, but they need to increase the skills and competencies to ensure that they're being productive, they're meeting state agency goals, and that they're really leading us down the path that all of our agencies and department need. So let's turn to Dr. Kiana Connor. Kiana is with Deloitte, but brings a wealth of background from the Commonwealth of Virginia as a former state chief administrator. So Kiana, help us think a little bit about these terms, upskilling and reskilling.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Before I dive right into strategic planning, I do want to take a step back to kind of level set on public sector talent acquisition and retention challenges, because while some have evolved over time, a lot of them have remained the same. We continue to see a growing gap in the talent value proposition in the public sector. We know the old paradigm recruitment initiatives in which employees who join the workforce 20 to 30 years ago were attracted to the benefit of long-term security and stability that comes with the state retirement plan and those generally modest annual to biannual pay raises. And of course, as both Jay and Peter mentioned, the value of the mission-based work for those who are called into public sector. I also just want to acknowledge that a portion of that workforce were content with the way work was performed, remaining the same through the full life cycle of their careers. Moving to the present, we are faced with new realities. The attractiveness of the security benefit, the retirement, and those modest pay raises is becoming less appealing. The compensation and innovation gap compared to the private sector is growing, and employees are really looking for organizations that will promote skill development and provide career mobility options. States were already on a journey to evaluate their workforce experience with new strategies to retain and develop their talent as market competition increased. However, the pandemic has really made skill building, job recovery, and the changing nature of work a national conversation. And then you pair that with the urgent need to address systemic inequities in our workforces. So all employers right now are really facing a watershed moment. So as state governments start to think about recovery and their organizations, what we call next normal, we think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to really reimagine the work. What is being performed in state agencies? How has it changed? How will it continue to change? And taking a real look at the workforce, who is performing the work, and how can we increase skill development, productivity, and overall satisfaction? So along those lines, we are starting to see a shift in talent acquisition from sourcing external resources to an increased focus on an organization's existing workforce. Let's call that a skills-focused workforce transformation. But before we can determine what that skill-focused transformation will entail, I have a slide that will help to answer a very important question for us. And that is, what is the current currency from a supply and demand perspective that allows us to align the right people and competencies with the skill gaps that exist within state agencies? Without having that data and insight, it becomes an overwhelming exercise on how states can use upskilling and reskilling to drive a skills-focused workforce. So as we think of upskilling, the process of learning new skills, and reskilling, learning new skills to do a different job. So the goal of this slide is to illustrate the full talent management ecosystem and how data-driven solutions and approaches can really help employees as well as agency leadership truly evaluate job needs and career options. When we think of traditional strategic workforce planning, I know a lot of people may think of a series of steps and processes. We wanted to capture a life cycle that brings workforce planning into action through existing talent management programs, data sources, and tools states may already use. So a granular understanding of the skills you have and need, in addition to making sure you have a system that is capable of capturing that data to enable agency leadership and states to make intelligent strategic workforce planning decisions. So the objective is to identify the skills you have, your workforce supply, versus the skills you need, the demand, to improve skill gaps through upskilling or reskilling, even automation potential, or more recruitment into your workforces. So the left side of the figure shows an overview of workforce supply. Employees have a profile in the talent marketplace that is based on assignment history, schooling, skills, abilities, knowledge, and preferences. External recruitment data, like your sourcing applicant tracking system, and then of course, internal personnel data and skills assessments and succession planning. These are all data sources that are mostly already available to agencies. And those are used to create what we are calling here an employee profile. Defining the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed on the demand side, on the right side, has traditionally created the biggest challenge for states, because it really does involve analyzing what industry trends and changes are happening. It requires gathering input from agency leadership on current and future needs, considering automation potential. And I know that's a topic for, I think, your next top 10 series, as well as customer and citizen experience, the demand for service and satisfaction. The pandemic has changed the way agencies are providing services to customer agencies as well as to citizens. So what new skill sets have emerged that will become a necessity in how work is performed and delivered? So these two buckets on the sides come together in the talent marketplace to match employee profile, again, those employee skills and career aspirations, and then potential positions, agency mission needs and demands. Learning and development on the bottom really bridges the skills gap between the supply and the demand with a comprehensive view of the talent ecosystem. It allows agency leadership to have robust conversations about building the appropriate competency that's upskilling and reskilling models to match what the data is telling them their demand is, as well as to implement intentional diversity and inclusion goals to promote a diverse workforce, allowing for career mobility. By taking advantage of workforce analytics tools, we really do think states can increase transparency on the choices that employees can make based on their employee profile to help cultivate and navigate satisfying careers. So what you have here is a skill fit, an ability fit, and a preference fit from the employee profile, which enables employees, not just leadership, to understand which assignments and broadening opportunities are available that aligns to their talents, their preferences, and their aspirations. We're used to seeing the KSAAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, but preferences is really going to be a motivating factor as we transition out of the pandemic. You're seeing workers who are saying, I like the way I've worked for the last year and a half, or I now want to be in a hybrid working model. This is going to be a characteristic and a theme that states will have to adapt into their overall model. So employees can better understand, using a model like this, what is required before being eligible to take on a desired assignment. From there, employees can start to set learning goals to improve skills and create development milestones that can be reached through stretch assignments, job shadowing, or even through partnerships with state universities and community colleges. Our community college systems are a great resource that is sometimes overlooked as states start to think through upskilling and reskilling programs. Pam, I intentionally focused today on the need to have a clear view of your workforce supply and demand and how workforce analytics can help to make those intelligent decisions on which upskilling and reskilling programs would support agency mission, because we know they will vary. Once agencies have identified those upskilling and reskilling programs, it's important to develop a communication strategy that underscores a culture that proactively promotes diversity and inclusion, career mobility, and gains employee buy-in.
Fantastic, Kiana. I really appreciate that. And I love the way you've referenced this as the talent management ecosystem and the life cycle. It is more than a step-by-step process. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And so now we're going to have an opportunity to hear from a state who's doing just that, who is taking a look at their entire system, the systematic approach to learning educational opportunities, building skills, building competencies. So I'm going to toss it over to Steve Harp over in Oklahoma to share a little bit about the initiatives happening there.
Thank you, Pam. So I'm Steve Hart. I serve on Governor Stitt's cabinet as Deputy Secretary for Digital Transformation and Administration. I'm also the Executive Director of the Office of Management Enterprise Services, which we provide statewide guidance for human resources to the state of Oklahoma. You know, it's interesting. I've only been in state government now for about 14 months. Came in right before the pandemic hit. It was interesting coming into this job. You find a lot of people saying, well, you know, when you get to the state, you're not going to have a lot of talent. What we found is that that's the exact opposite. However, to really truly understand that talent and to apply a lot of what you guys have heard, we quickly moved into a process called calibration. What I found is you could go pull the performance reviews of a lot of the staff and it would read, you know, Susie's great or Jim's got a problem. But the problem is that was coming from a supervisor, manager, director who had a very myopic view of that person and their abilities. And so what I did, what we've done here at the state, is now we bring in, and we've done this. We just finished our first year cycle of it, which the results were phenomenal. We brought in all of our leaders, and we did this last September, and we did their calibration, which meant we had to go back and redefine. In the state of Oklahoma, you can be an exceeds employee, a meets, needs improvement, or not met. Those are the four categories. And what we found is everyone was just kind of passing out these things as rewards for a good job. Nothing else came with it. and that the bars were so low and people really didn't want to have the tough conversations, which really meant our managers in some cases weren't devoted to their core function, which isn't task management. It's development of the people. You know, who you put in front of someone to lead and put your name on something matters more than the task at hand that you're charging them with. And so there was a whole culture based in that we had to address. And then at the same time, we're having to address the whole everything around diversity and inclusion, which we have a great movement here. Our Department of Human Services, OMS, our Department of Healthcare Authority runs our Medicaid, Medicare programs here. We've all done a great job of talking with each other, letting our employees direct what they're looking for in terms of inclusion and in terms of diversity. And we all have, like as director now of a $1.5 billion agency, my diversity inclusion team acts as an advisor to me. Right now we have like 35, 36 people that are on that council, and they run their own agenda and they give me a different voice, so we can start getting to more of the heart of what OMES is and what our employees look like. Back on the other side of this thing, in terms of performance management, it's super key that when we went into the room for the first time and people didn't know what to expect, it took us an hour and a half to go through the first 10 names, because we go through all the names. Everyone that gets submitted, for every bucket, we went through every single name. And we start with the hardest group, which is your exceptional employee. And what we did find is people were just literally giving ribbons to people. It was just like, so you've got this other person that you rely on to provide services, and they never take a lunch break, and they're working weekends and crazy hours and just giving you all this effort. And you got these other 10 people over here, they're getting paid the same amount of money and they're getting the same grade. And that stuff didn't make sense. So what happened is those managers are sitting there with a room of their peers, and they would say, well, Steve Harp's exceptional. And everyone would kind of look, and you start seeing body language develop. It was very interesting in itself. After we got through the first 10 or so names, and then we again kept restating, I didn't force, out of 1,100 people, I only forced 2 changes on my own. Everything else was led by the peer group. And so the frontline manager, we went through them first. When their time was done, they leave the room, because now we're judging the next group. When we're done with them, they leave. And eventually it was just me and my executive team sitting there, with the results of the day. And actually that took a series of days. To get through it the first time was painful. Then we come back around to January of this year, and we went through round 2 where we did all the SMEs, and we went back through and looked at the leadership again. In Oklahoma, we've decided there are 4 things we're going to run on. We're going to run on human capital management, because you've got to have good people. We're going to run on relationships, because they matter. We're very team oriented here. The agencies work more together now than they ever had, especially, and you may find this in your own states, based on COVID. You didn't have a choice. You couldn't live in your own castles anymore. And then, of course, technology touches everything, and then finance, because we want to be, we're not trying to be the cheapest provider of services. We're trying to be the best value. And that's a very different statement than what Oklahoma had lived on previously. When you get back into human capital management, we've spent so much time focusing on the development of our managers, making sure we have and our employees understand what those different levels mean of performance. And when we give you that, when you've earned that level, then truly that's a good thing. The second thing we had to get into, and we're still honestly working through this, is getting people to understand that being a MEETS employee is amazing. That means you're doing your job, you're probably exceeding occasionally, and you're getting paid for the work. Exceptional means you're exceptional all the time. I should be able to take that person, go into the cabinet meeting with Governor Stitt and his team and say, this person this is what a state employee looks like. And if we model this, man, we're gonna have an amazing year if we can find more people like this. Long story short, we went through that 1,100 people, and we got more feedback. We just had we took a day off, had our employee appreciation day here. Actually, it was offsite, and we're backing this thing up with rewards. We're also now managing all the tiers of our employee base, including the managers and directors, so that to our employees, it builds trust. Because in the end, when we're not taking care of those people that we rely on the most to get work done, and we're letting all these other issues result or hang around for a while, and they're not dealt with, they become cancers. And so in the state of Oklahoma, I was fortunate. When I walked in the door, we had just started our branding effort. So we have all this new branding now. And by the way, we decided to make branding free to everybody. We didn't license it. It's like our employees can go home and make their own shirts if they want. We don't care. Matter of fact, we encourage it. And we see a lot of that. Our employees like it enough where they went home and we got certain divisions or certain teams that they have to stay within the branding standards. But at the same time, they develop their own personal touch to it, which has been kind of fun. You start making it a community. And then you bring in your diversity and inclusion council with a voice of, of some that may have been felt like they were left out, but also can help you look at another 180 or 360 degree view on issues and problems. And that's been helpful. But man, when you manage performance the right way, and you look at just from OMES's perspective, we found $1.6 million that was sitting there. We were getting nothing out of, and those positions hadn't been doing. We had people literally, in some cases, reading books all day long. We took action on that. We gave them a chance first to, hey, here's an issue. This is the problem. Doesn't matter who managed you before, didn't manage who the director was before. This is unacceptable. Let's work with you to get you where. We had people crying. I mean, literally, they would cry. Thank God someone's finally going to see value in me and help me. We also had some people that had to leave the building, to be quite honest. But once you do those actions and you find out who are the keepers, you get people in those buckets, you make achievement important again. All of a sudden, you start building a wealth of, hey, I love working here. I'll give you a story. When I first took this job, OMES was one of Governor Stitt's #1 problems in the state to go resolve, because Essential Services Agency, everything came here to die. And the problem was we were over bureaucratic, yes, but at the same time, we weren't managing workflow or our people very well. And our people actually had talent, they have experience, and they were dying on the vine because we couldn't get decisions made. So there was a lot of changes in leadership. At the same time, we were able to go through and accurately using that calibration method of letting so if Steve Harp's in a room and I impact 20 people, all 20 people have an opinion of my performance. We did typically give weight to the manager, but that manager had to listen to all the input. So if they were saying I was exceptional, or the other side, we had some managers saying, I'll use myself, as a fictional example, hey, Steve Harps had not met. Then you'd have 20 or 10 people stand up and go, no, he did this, he did this, he did this. And then that person has to take that feedback as well. It works both ways. You watch this thing this teeter-totter start balancing out. When we left calibration and the results on 1,100 people in January, we actually changed the either positive, negative. We changed more than 36% of the scores. We did surveys of because after that, they can't, our managers can't give appraisal reviews until after that process completes. Once that process is done, we took a survey back from our employees, and we started seeing our satisfaction scores going up. Actually, OMES in the state of Oklahoma now is the #1 rated agency in terms of employee satisfaction, and that's completed by a third party. We don't drive that. So we still have a long way to go, but my point is, I can talk about this forever, because if you get brought into an agency at any level, your #1 thing you got to do is rely on your talent, and you got to figure out how you quickly can hold those accountable that have been leading that talent, or get them on the same page where you can score the talent. And we took all that into consideration. Your employees will love you for it if you do this. And I've seen, I was at Capital One for a while. I spent a lot of time in the private sector before I came into public service. And it's been, in my 32 years of being a technologist / business person, it's been one of the best things I've seen. Capital One, outside of state operations, is one of the companies that really does what they say. Like, do the right thing is their motto, and they carry that. Well, ours is we're a background organization, so we also put our motto in front of them, or a mission statement, which is we serve those who serve Oklahomans, because we're in the background. DHS doesn't do their job without us. OHCA doesn't do their job. The governor doesn't do his. They don't have OMES there, then it doesn't happen. But I have to have good people, and our people have to have a culture. They're going to spend more time away from their homes. This is old data. You guys already know this. But I want the agencies to choose us, and I want our people to choose us. If you want people to choose you, treat them fairly, make sure you grade them out, deal with the cancers in your organization, wherever they are. Start with positive intent first. By the way, I will say this, the calibration sessions are closed door. It's management only. When we go through that process, They're not allowed to, if you have a negative opinion of someone's performance, you still have to find a way to present that with positive intent. We're all about trying to give people the chance of growth and opportunity first. If they don't take it, then I'm all about getting them out of the organization and either replacing that job or using it for savings, because we also challenge ourselves in that space as well. We are creating ways, although we have a surplus of 1.6 billion this year, and that's without federal money, because Governor Stitt opened our state up a little earlier than others. We've been fortunate in that space, but even without that, we're going to manage our payroll and our staff to where if we continuously manage that lower end, get them up or get them out using this process, this year alone, it's 1.6 million that I can then turn that into raises and things like that. Here's the key though. You guys may fight this in the states that you live. I'm fighting it here, and we just passed some like groundbreaking legislation where our merit protection program is gone, and we still have a program. It's not merit protection. It's going to be changed, and we're in the process of defining that. But basically, people will still have protection, but they'll have protection to go through a 25-day process. Well, that has really kind of killed us here in the state, because there's been people that have dragged arguments out for months and years when they really weren't producing. Now, some of that's not true, but I can document a lot that has been. So we work with the legislature to fix that. We have. So in the state of Oklahoma, we now have better business-friendly rules for our employees. We have more landscape where they can truly travel through the state and build their careers. We have multiple agencies now following this plan that I've just outlined to you, to where their performance, they'll find themselves judged the same or meeting the same type of criteria, and it's going to be scored the same agency to agency, which is big for us. And then at the same time, we're still competing with the open market for these skill sets, specifically in technology and accounting and in certain places like that. But we also find that we're winning. The reason is, it's not just, you can't just sell people on the fact that, hey, we want to serve. You got to sell people on, this is where your community is. This is how we look at diversity, inclusion. This is how we'll grade you. You have the chance, and you focus on the positive, you have the chance to achieve so many things. I'm telling you guys right now, if you can't get people to come work for you in a time of COVID, even as we come out of this, and with all like the CARES projects, that the CARES time that we just came out of, going into the ARP time that's in front of us, you have a chance, and so do I, and so does Oklahoma, to change all of this, like for generations, literally, because of the money that's rolling in. Well, people are excited to do that stuff. They love doing great things. So I've said a lot, and I know that covers a lot. And primarily, I wanted to talk to you guys about what we did in the space of talent management. But we've applied this. We've done it for a year. We're rolling this out through the state right now. It's taken on like wildfire. And I think it's going to be one of the difference makers for us to be able to not just retain talent, but attract it. And we're starting to see that. So I hope this has been beneficial to you guys. I get pretty excited about it. I'll pull the lever now and jump out, but it's been great seeing you guys today.
Thanks, Steve, so much. And again, another great example of different initiatives, different approaches, different ways that you can work towards strategic workforce planning. As I expected, we were going to just scratch the surface of this conversation today. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to get to some of our comments in the chat. So please network, build those relationships. I know all of our presenters would be happy for you to reach out to them to continue this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today for NASCA's Top 10. Our next event is on June the 9th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be focusing on digital government, automation, and augmentation. So you can find all of these recordings, resources, and more materials on NASCA's Knowledge Center at nasca.org. So we look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll talk to you next month. Have a great day.